Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the We're Talking Movies show. As always, I'm Andrew Duvall, and I'm joined by my co-host and friend, Cade Bonzel. And today we're talking about one of our favorite superhero films. We're talking about Logan from 2017. Cade, we're both big fans of this movie.
Yes, we are.
What good things do you have to say about it?
Well, first off, here's I think the best thing about the movie. That would just have to be the story. The story for this movie is just great. Well, first off, it's a really nice father-daughter story before we talk about the superhero elements and the Western approach. It's just a nice father-daughter story for Wolverine and his daughter Laura. I do like their chemistry. I like how their relationship is explored. And I like the fact that they're two very different people in the same way. I mean, they're obviously very similar, but also very different. And that's a nice dynamic.
Yeah, because you got the very grumpy and rough around the edges Logan, but you've got the much more quiet and reserved Laura.
Yeah, of course. And I also love how, and we've talked about this before, I think this movie is a Western before it's a superhero movie.
It really is. I mean, when you think about it, this is a pretty simple plot to a movie, in all honesty. It's basically Wolverine and Professor X trying to get Laura from the southern US border to the northern US border, basically.
Yeah. And it's definitely, yeah, like you said, it's not so much a world threatening or world altering mission. Like, think back to X-Men Days of Future Past. That was about saving the timeline and stopping mutants from being extinct and also humans. Whereas you look at this, the plot is actually pretty simple. We got to get Laura back to where she needs to be to reunite with her friends. And Wolverine's kind of grows with her as well. And it's not another simple, I mean, I don't want to say it like that, but it's not as simple as the hero needs to stop the villain.
Yeah, it's the plot reminds me more of something like True Grit or The Searchers, or like a really classic Western.
Or maybe how James Mangold kind of described it when he pitched the movie, sort of like Little Miss Sunshine in a way.
I hadn't considered that one, but that weirdly fits.
Yeah, it kind of does actually. And I kind of get what he was going for when he pitched the movie. But yeah, it does fit well. So yeah, I really like the story of the movie. Another thing would have to be, and I think you agree with this, the gritty tone that the film has.
Yeah, the fact that this is the first R-rated X-Men movie.
No, that was Deadpool.
Did Deadpool come out before this?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so the second R-rated X-Men movie. Not a big point, but this is a very gritty, almost kind of sad movie. Like you got these not one but two very iconic characters in Wolverine and Professor X from a very iconic film franchise that started over 20 years ago at this point.
Yep.
And you just kind of seeing them, they're both kind of at the end of their rope. Like, what else is there out for us to fight for here? Everybody else is gone. We're being hunted like hit like dogs. Like, what else do we have to live for? But then and that reflects in both Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart's performance. Patrick Stewart is awesome in this movie, just kind of playing this kind of like fallen hero, Professor X. But then they both get something in their lives, this unexpected event in happened to help Laura that kind of revitalizes them a little bit and kind of reminds them what they were fighting for all those years.
Yeah, and I also love how this film feels tonally different from the rest of the franchise. It was a nice touch and it helps separate it and make it feel more like a standalone. And the tone also works. It's appropriate for the themes that the film explores.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think that a lighthearted film would have really worked with the type of story that this was telling.
No, especially with some of the there's some pretty damn graphic violence in this one.
Yes, very much.
Like they took the gloves off for this one.
And I'm glad they did.
Like obviously, and yeah, I know we mentioned Deadpool a minute ago. Obviously, that was honestly probably more graphic than this, but that was much more humorous than this. The fact that this is all super serious, I think, kind of makes it more visceral.
Yeah, of course. And I think aside from the tone and the story, another highlight that we just have to bring up would be Hugh Jackman's performance as Wolverine. I think this is not only his best performance as Wolverine, this might be one of, if not the best performances of his whole career.
It really is because this he'd been playing Wolverine for 15 years at this point almost.
17 years.
17. Oh, yeah. The first X Men came out in 2000. Why do I think 2003? Either way, but yeah, this was quite a gut punching performance. Again, like I talked about it a minute ago with Patrick Stewart, but in this one, Wolverine is kind of just fighting for the sake of fighting because he doesn't know anything else anymore. He's got nothing really else to live for. It's just him and Professor X, and it's like we just got to keep running and keep running. And but then he gets introduced to Laura and then learns that she's his daughter. It's like he's got to process that on top of everything else, plus the fact they're being hunted.
That, and I think the old man Logan concept was also fun to explore in this movie as well.
Yeah, because that's the closest I think we're ever going to get to an actual Old Man Logan adaptation. Obviously, we couldn't do a full adaptation because people own rights to different characters that appear in the Old Man Logan comics.
Yes. But aside from Jackman's performance, I think that his dynamic and chemistry with Laura, as well as Professor X, was also a nice touch because at the same time as you have this sort of bleak superhero film, it also feels kind of family themed in a way with their relationship with each other, his dynamic with Laura and Professor X. And that kind of gave the movie, like we discussed with some of our other reviews, it gave the movie some heart, which was nice.
Yeah, that was kind of a, again, it kind of doesn't take away from the gritty tone, but it kind of gives you a reprieve from it. Like the scenes where it's just the three of them, and there's kind of like the father daughter aspect between Wolverine and Laura, and then the grandfather granddaughter relationship between Professor X and Laura, because obviously Professor X was always a little bit more personable than Wolverine was.
And it was a nice reminder of what they were fighting for as well. Why don't we talk about Laura, aka X-23? She was such a great addition to the franchise, and I liked how, here's what's nice about her. She was a sincere character with a backstory, a motivation, and character development throughout this movie. And I'm disappointed that we only saw her once.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll ever see her again because I mean, yeah, we got this whole multiverse fiasco with the MCU that's going to be playing out over the next few years, but I don't know if they're going to bring her back. I'd quite like to see her again. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a bit of an age difference because now Daphne Keene is 6 years older than she was when she would have filmed this.
Right. But yeah, I really liked her character a lot. I liked how she was silent for most of the movie. It made her seem like more of a mystery, which was nice. I loved her relationship with Wolverine as well. That really felt special. And you could really buy the father daughter chemistry that the two of them had as well.
Mm.
But aside from that, I think another thing that deserves a lot of attention is the fact that this movie, like I said before, how it feels kind of separate from the rest of the franchise, how it just feels tonally different and like its own standalone. I think that it's such a fitting epilogue to the X-Men franchise. Because if you think about it, chronologically, I think it does take place after every other movie. And it does work as an epilogue or climax to the entire franchise. It begins with Wolverine and it ends with Wolverine.
Yeah, that's actually really poetic. Plus, they tie back into the not prophecy, the vision that was told to Wolverine in the Wolverine that he dies on his back holding his heart in his hand.
Yes, absolutely. And with Wolverine, who is, arguably the star of the franchise, he has a fitting conclusion because it's an arc that was previously explored many times, him being a reluctant hero. But this time throughout the journey, he learns what it means to be a father, which was not explored before.
Yeah, because well, he's never really had anybody to take care of. I mean, the closest he got was Kitty Pride, but that was more of like a begrudging friend relationship than anything.
And I guess maybe with Rogue as well.
Yeah, but we didn't get a really great version of Rogue.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation for another time. But aside from that, one of the characters that it does wrap up very well would have to be Professor X. Professor X is as much a part of this franchise as Wolverine was, and I think he does get a proper send off in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, why don't we get into our cons with this movie? Do you have any cons?
Um, the villain's a bit forgettable in my opinion.
Are you talking about Dr. Rice?
No, I'm talking about Pierce.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Rice, I thought actually kind of stood on his own pretty well, but I really like Boyd Holbrook as an actor, and he does play a very good villain. Like he was the villain, he was the Corinthian in the Sandman series, which I loved him in that role. But yeah, he's kind of forgettable as the mutant hunting bounty hunter in this one. If that makes any sense. He kind of just shows up and is just sort of evil and doesn't really leave too much of a mark on you. Like the only thing I remember is that he's got a robotic arm. That's like the only thing I remember.
No, yeah, I get it. I think that a con that I have with this movie is I wish we could have gotten a couple more explanations than we did. Like, and here's what I mean. I know that this movie tries to stand on its own, but I kind of wish we had a little bit more clarity about what happened in between this movie and Days of Future Past, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel like there was a couple of details that could have been filled in a little bit more there because if I'm remembering correctly, Days of Future Past ended in an X-Men victory, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah, I was just hoping we could have gotten a little bit more clarity on what happened. I get that it was kind of implied, but I just wish we could have gotten a couple more answers. My last con, and this is something I shouldn't be worrying about, but I just kind of do because, okay, so would you say that this franchise has quite a few inconsistencies?
Yeah, because how many times have they reintroduced Wolverine in these movies?
Quite a few, but my inconsistency problem with this movie has to do with the adamantium bullet. Although X-Men Origins is definitely one of the weaker entries in the franchise, I think that the fact that the adamantium bullet is lethal in this one, whereas in X-Men Origins, it can only erase memories. I wish that they could have tried to stay true to that. Just it's another inconsistency, in my opinion, when it's used to kill X-24. I get that it makes more sense than the whole memory loss part, but it just creates another inconsistency if you think about it.
Yeah, I agree.
But other than that, those are my only cons with the movie. I love this movie overall. It's definitely one of my favorite superhero films. But yeah, what would you give it for a rating on a scale of 1 to 10?
9.5.
I will agree. I will give it a 9.5. It's that good of a movie. And yeah, I think it will forever be one of my favorite superhero films. And I hope it's not a superhero film that people forget about in the years to come.
I'm not super worried about that. The only thing that I'm super worried about is how are they going to explain Wolverine being back in Deadpool 3?
My answer to that is time will tell.
Yeah, I hope they handle that well because this movie gives Wolverine the perfect send off, and now they're bringing him back. So,
We'll find out, man.
well, that was our review of Logan. As always, this has been the We're Talking Movies show. Please remember to like, and subscribe, and please tune in next time.